girl like you, why are you sitting alone in a place like this?" The question came like a strange southern breeze, threading through the shedding branches of ancient oaks in Palm Hollow Park. Autumn Wade didn't move. The voice hissed past the nape of her neck, mocking, laced with threat. She hadn't heard footsteps, only the sudden silence of the wind. As if the entire forest had paused to hold its breath, Autumn turned her head, her hand still resting on the dog-eared page of an old novel she'd picked up from a roadside bookstore. Two men stood there in police uniforms, solid, imposing, like twin brick walls. One was older, stockier, his sun-weathered skin etched with time and grit. The other was younger, leaner, eyes darting nervously like he'd stumbled into a joke he wasn't sure he wanted to be part of. The younger officer, Luke Brenner, gave her a lopsided grin as he looked down at her. Beside him, his partner Jim Slater avoided Autumn's gaze. Brenner's badge gleamed in the afternoon sun. Light so beautiful it turned bitter when reflecting off a man like him. "I'm just reading," Autumn said, her voice calmer than the tremble in her hands. "I haven't done anything wrong, but I can fancy," Dancer murked, stepping closer. "You got ID, sweetheart? Could be you're loitering, or scoping the place out to steal something." A heartbeat passed. Autumn blinked. "This is a public park." "Public," Brenner chuckled, his voice greasy. "Funny how some folks think public means a place to sit around looking pretty and doing nothing useful." Autumn slowly reached for her bag, every movement deliberate, as if each blink was calculated. Berated. "I have ID if you need to check." Brenner didn't even glance at the bag. "No, I think a visual inspection will do just fine." And just like that, quicker than a snap, he flicked his baton and flipped the hem of her skirt, a cold gust, a moment exposed. Shame struck like a thunderclap. Autumn gasped and recoiled, instinctively clutching her skirt. Her face went pale. The book dropped beside her worn boots. She stared at him, chest heaving. "Are you insane?" she cried, her voice cracked but unbroken. "You just assaulted me." "Assault?" Brenner burst out laughing, like she'd told a joke. "Come on, don't get all serious. We're just messing around. It's Sunday, you know." Slater let out a half-hearted laugh, one that caught in his throat. His Adam's apple bobbed, his discomfort plain. He knew this had gone too far. Autumn stood, not because she felt strong, but because she refused to stay small. "You think you can do this to anyone?" she said, eyes locked on Brenner. "You think you'll get away with it?" "Not everyone," Brenner grinned. "Just girls like you." Those words struck like oil on an open flame. Autumn's heart was chaos, but her mind was clear. No trembling, no panic, just steady movements. Programmed, precise, as she pulled out her phone. Entitled, "What do you think of Autumn's response? Do you believe an ordinary person can rise up against injustice even at their weakest moment?" Share your thoughts, because this story is just beginning and what's coming will take your breath away. The phone rang twice. A familiar voice answered. "Maya, I need you." A pause, brief but solid, then one word sharp and unwavering. "Palm Hollow. Bench near the east playground." "Don't move," Maya replied, not missing a beat. "I'm coming, 15 minutes. The call ended. Autumn didn't look at Brenner. She said nothing to Slater. She just sat back down, pulled her skirt firmly over her knees, and stared out at the lake. Her jaw clenched, her eyes burned, not from fear, but from memory. Because Autumn Wade wasn't just a vulnerable girl in a park. She was someone who had once been pulled from an abusive foster home by a black woman in a blue uniform, Officer Maya Williams. Back then, Autumn had been too young to understand justice, but she knew what a kind gaze felt like for the first time in her life. She had learned one thing: fear doesn't vanish on its own, it dies when you face it. And today, for the first time in years, she knew it was time to stand up for herself. In 15 minutes, justice would arrive. Stepping out of a dust-covered Dodge Charger, with braided hair, sunglasses glowing in the golden hour light, and a badge that still carried its honor. But until then, Autumn waited, gripping her phone like a shield, pride forged like steel. The wind still blew, but not a single leaf dared fall. Have you ever waited for someone, not just to save you, but to remind you that you deserve to be protected? Autumn did, and in that moment she was no longer a victim. She was living proof of strength that had once been buried. The Dodge Charger cut through Palm Hollow's misty roads like a blade through thin fog. No sirens, no headlights, just the deep growl of a V8 engine slipping beneath Spanish moss. Maya Williams didn't blink. She knew exactly where she was going. She had promised 15 minutes. She was early. The uniform wasn't fully on. A civilian jacket over a crisp military dude shirt, badge clipped at the waist. Her boots still held dust from that morning's academy drills. But her mind wasn't there. Her thoughts were with the girl from long ago, a child curled up by a broken heater in a filthy house, her eyes far older than her age. That was 8 years ago. Autumn was only 12 then, skinny and silent. The man claiming to be her uncle screamed outside. But Maya's didn't yell, didn't call for backup. She just walked in, knelt to the girl's level, and gently said, "You don't have to stay here anymore." That moment bonded them for life. Now Autumn was grown, but the tremble in her voice on the phone, Maya heard it. And 6 simple words, "He lifted my skirt up," had lit a cold, sharp fire in Maya's chest. Autumn Wade remained motionless. Her legs were pressed tightly together like a gate locked shut. Her eyes were fixed on the lake surface, as if it held the answer to something far greater than fear. Her book lay quietly at her feet, a silent period in the eye of a storm. The 2 officers stood nearby, their posture too casual, too smug, the natural ease of men unaccustomed to being questioned. Maya cut the engine and stepped out of her car. No loud noises, no signs announcing her arrival. She walked forward, each step heavy like a countdown. When she reached the clearing, she stopped, 10 paces away from the 2 men. Her voice rang out. Not loud, but sharp enough to slice through the air. "Give me your badge numbers." The officers turned. Brumaire, the older one, smirked with disdain. "I said it clearly," Maya repeated, every word as crisp as a blade against stone. "Badge numbers, names." "Nah," Brenner sneered. "And who are you, sweetheart?" Maya didn't answer. She simply pulled a wallet from her hip and flipped it open. The gold badge glinted in the late afternoon sun. Internal Affairs. Sergeant Maya Williams. She may have been off duty, but her sense of duty never clocked out. Slater immediately straightened, his jaw clenched. "Ma'am, we were just—" "You don't have permission to speak," Maya cut in, her eyes still locked on Brenner. Rayner's smirk began to fade. "We were following up on a report of suspicious activity, possibly loitering." "Loitering?" Maya shot a glance at Autumn. "She's holding a book, not a crowbar." Rayner shrugged. "We had reason to be suspicious." "No," Maya said, stepping forward. "You didn't have reason. You had opportunity. Don't ever confuse the two." A soft rustling came from the playground. A small crowd had gathered. Parents, joggers, a few elderly men walking their dogs. Phones were up. Evidence was being recorded. Maya looked directly at Brenner. "Did you touch her?" Brenner's jaw tightened. "He's making it up. Then you won't mind if I pull footage from the park's security cameras, or your body cam, correct?" The words hung in the air like a knife waiting to drop. "You're still wearing your body cam, aren't you?" Brenner said nothing. Slater, now drenched in sweat, mumbled, "Lines. Charging at the station." At last, Maya turned to Autumn for the first time since arriving. "You okay?" Autumn nodded, but it was the kind of nod that held back a whole earthquake. "She never cried," someone murmured in the crowd. "She just sat there. But I saw it all. He lifted her skirt. Thought it was funny." An older man wearing a veteran's cap stepped forward. His voice was gravelly, but steady. Maya looked at Brenner again. This time, her eyes spoke not just for her rank, but for justice that had long been silenced. "Badge number." Maya repeated it, her voice like a cold blade. Still no response. She pulled out her phone, opened the voice recorder, and held it high. For the record, officer is refusing to provide identification. Suspected misconduct is being documented with time and witnesses. The silence was thick. Then Autumn stood. She took a step forward, not trembling, not hesitating. Her voice wasn't loud, but it rang out like a church bell. His name is Luke Brenner. All eyes turned to her. Badge number 31,478. His partner is James Slater. Badge number 30,952. I memorized them while they were laughing. Maya nodded. Slowly, firmly. Good. Then she turned to face the crowd, her tone firm yet calm, a voice that commanded without shouting. Anyone who directly witnessed what happened, please stay. Internal Affairs will arrive within 20 minutes. Your statements matter. Slater now looked ready to dissolve into the grass. Sweat trickled down his forehead. He couldn't raise his eyes. Werner fumed, jaw locked, veins bulging at his neck. How far do you people want to drag my name through the mud? He snarled. You're going to regret turning this into a damn circus. Maya stepped closer, close enough that Brenner could see his own reflection in her aviator's sunglasses. No, she said, voice low, you'll be the one with regrets. I just showed up. You turned it into a stage. Then she turned to Autumn, her gaze softening, and said the only thing that truly mattered. You're not alone anymore. And for the first time in a very long while, Autumn believed that was true. By the time the second unmarked patrol car pulled in, the sun was brushing the horizon, casting a copper glow across the lake. The crowd had doubled in size. They were no longer just bystanders. They were witnesses. Maya Williams stood at the center of that circle. No need to shout. Her presence was like steel driven into bedrock, unshakable. Two Internal Affairs officers exited the vehicle, both in plain clothes, but the tension strung around them like barbed wire made their purpose unmistakable. One of them, a sharp-eyed Latina detective named Rowena Fields, approached quickly with a folder in hand. We got the call. Who's in command on scene? Maya didn't blink. I am, Fields nodded. Do we have witnesses? Plenty, Maya replied, her gaze sweeping over the silent wall of people guarding the truth. Start with the veteran. He saw the moment it happened. Fields turned to her partner, whispered a few quick instructions, then walked toward Autumn. Can you give a preliminary statement? Autumn glanced at Maya, and with just the slightest nod, so slight, from the woman who had once changed her life, Autumn began to speak, not weakly, not theatrically, but truthfully, like she was speaking from her own flesh and blood. I was sitting and reading a book. He approached me, commented on my appearance, then said he wanted to inspect me visually. I didn't understand until her voice caught in her throat. Her breath hitched for a moment, but her eyes stayed wide open, still staring straight ahead. Some statements don't need tears to strike the heart, because truth, when spoken in quiet courage, echoes farther than any scream. Are you ready to be a witness when justice falls silent? Think carefully, because sometimes change begins with just one person brave enough to step out from the crowd. Use his baton, flip my skirt up. Adam's voice wasn't raised, wasn't harsh, but each word cut through the air, tearing down the curtain of what people like to call normal. It wasn't accidental, it was intentional, to humiliate me. Silence fell like a thick blanket, heavier than any shout. No one moved, no one coughed. Just a quiet voice from the crowd. She's braver than I've ever dared to be. Maya stepped forward. This time, no formalities, no announcements. She looked directly at Brenner and Slater, like staring at two stains trying to wipe themselves clean. As of this moment, both of you are suspended from duty. Surrender your weapons and badges, Brenner scoffed, trying to hold on to a last shred of bravado. You can't be serious. But then Rowena Fields, cool, composed, interjected, her voice like a stamp sealing an order. This is not a request, officer. It's a command. No probable cause, Brenner growled. but even he could hear the panic leaking into his tone. Maya didn't take her eyes off him. You used a baton to make physical contact with a civilian, no cause, no consent. Her gaze remained locked. That's misconduct? That's harassment? That's abuse of authority. And possibly a serious civil rights violation. It happened in broad daylight, in front of witnesses, in a public park. She stepped forward. Just one step, but it landed like a verdict. I've seen careers fall apart over far less. You should have known better. Slater, hands trembling, unbuckled his gun and badge, offering them with both hands like a man apologizing to his reflection. Brenner stood frozen. Maya didn't repeat the order. She gave it by simply being there. But finally she spoke again, one last time. I said, badge, gun, now. Brenner cursed under his breath, yanked both from his belt, and shoved them at Rowena Fields. Cowards, he spat, turning your backs on your own. Maya's voice was soft enough to sound gentle, but that only made it more terrifying. If your own means disgracing the badge, then I'll turn my back. Every time. A wave of murmurs rippled through the crowd, not out of anger, but agreement. Phones were raised, videos were being recorded, streamed live. Social media was starting to tell a story. Not just of an incident, but of a turning point. Autumn, who had been still since giving her statement, stepped up beside Maya. Her voice wasn't for Brenner, nor for the crowd. She was speaking to herself, but everyone heard. My whole life I feared silence, thought it was the safest place to hide. She took a breath, but today I understand. Silence isn't safety, silence is permission. And I've stopped giving it. Maya turned, her gaze softening. That's your voice, she said. Don't ever let anyone take it from you again. And then something changed. No noise, no dramatics, just a moment. Small, but beautiful. A little girl, maybe 8 or 9, pushed through the legs of the adults, holding a folded sheet of paper, and handed it to Autumn. Autumn knelt and opened it. The note, written in wobbly blue marker, read, "You're really strong, I saw it." Autumn smiled. Not a big smile, but a real one. Rowena Fields cleared her throat gently, breaking the moment with a low, professional tone. We'll escort both officers back to the investigation unit. Sergeant Williams, IA thanks you for your timely intervention. Maya nodded, her eyes never leaving the crowd, still watching. We're not done. This is just the beginning. As the 2 officers were led away through the silent crowd, an elderly woman with silver hair and teary eyes whispered, "God bless you, child." She was speaking to Autumn, and this time no one mistook it for an empty phrase. A voice rang out from the crowd. This is what justice should look like. But Maya wasn't there for the applause. She didn't smile, didn't gloat. She stood beside the girl she once saved, now standing tall for herself. Because this wasn't the end. It was the line, and together they had just crossed it. District 9 headquarters, with its stark white walls, coldly clean and stripped of compassion, felt more like a hospital without healing. When Sergeant Maya Williams entered the main lobby, the air shifted, not because of temperature, but because of eyes, posture, the way conversations stopped. Her uniform was impeccable, her hair tied in perfect regulation form, her badge freshly polished. Her body cam blinked a steady green, silent warning in every pulse. No one greeted her, and she understood why. They didn't like that she had brought one of their own in. They hated even more that she was right. Behind Maya, Detective Rowena Fields followed, carrying a sealed evidence bag, holding Brenner and Slater's guns and badges. They passed the bulletin board, where Officer of the Month was still Luke Brenner. But by tomorrow morning, that photo would be gone. Outside the interrogation rooms, they came face to face with Captain J.T. Moreland, his back slightly hunched, his gait uneven from a knee injury sustained during the Newark incident in 1994. This man had near-zero tolerance for nonsense. "Did you keep this clean?" he asked, his voice low, almost rhetorical. Maya didn't hesitate. "We have video, we have witnesses, a veteran gave a statement, and a teenager recorded the aftermath. Very clean." Moreland exhaled, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "The police union is blowing up my phone. You've just made yourself an enemy of half the department." Maya didn't blink. "Good. At least now I know which half to keep an eye on." Moreland's gaze shifted into something between exhaustion and respect. Then he opened the internal debrief room. Inside were 2 statement tables. Slater's table was empty. He had requested time before giving a formal statement. At the other table sat Autumn Wade. Back straight, hands folded in her lap. She no longer looked like a girl. She looked like someone who'd grown up in less than a single afternoon. Maya stepped in, clearing her throat gently. "You okay?" Autumn turned to her. And this time, when she nodded, the steel was visible in her eyes. "I'm ready." An internal affairs officer handed Maya a folder. Inside, a typed copy of Autumn's statement, time-stamped photos of the scene, the backup of Maya's body cam footage. Each piece was a sharp, honest slice of truth, not just exposing misconduct, but affirming this: anyone can be justice if they dare to speak up. Have you ever thought you were too small to create change? That girl once did, until she stood and refused to let fear speak for her. "This is enough to open a formal investigation," the IA officer noted after reviewing the file, but the district attorney wanted more. "More?" Maya raised an eyebrow. "They want a confession. They want proof this is a pattern, not an isolated incident." Maya placed a steady finger on the file. "And I'll get it for them." That afternoon, she sat alone in her office. No automated search tools. She didn't trust them to uncover what needed to be seen. She went the old-school way, combing through individual complaint files, internal evaluations, and closed reports marked insufficient evidence. Most of them from women of color, women who didn't have the power or resources to fight back. Then she found the name, Sharon McBride, 2018. Complaint: improper physical search by Officer Luke Brenner during a routine traffic stop. Conclusion: lack of evidence. Case closed. Maya pulled the file and instinctively dialed the number, a number she somehow still remembered after all these years. "Hello, this is Sergeant Mayor Williams. I'm calling about the complaint you filed in 2018. There was a pause. The woman's voice tightened. "Maybe told me back then nothing could be done." "The people who told you that," Maya replied slowly, "didn't have what I have now. Silence." "Oh, what do you need?" "Your truth," Maya said. "And maybe your courage, too." Meanwhile, back at the precinct, Slater returned. Pale-faced, forehead damp with sweat. His eyes looked like someone who had just crawled out of a sealed bunker, full of guilt. I didn't touch her," he stammered, "but I didn't stop it either. I laughed like it was a joke." Maya wasn't angry. Her eyes carried a clear sadness, the kind that comes from seeing someone's true nature and knowing the damage can't be undone. "Do you understand what your silence cost her?" Slater nodded. "Yes, Sergeant." "Then don't let that silence be meaningless. Speak." And he did. Everything. The locker room jokes, how Brenner targeted women he thought had no one behind them. The after-shift drinking sessions, when Brenner bragged like he was untouchable. Slater gave names, dates, locations. Enough to connect 3 previously ignored complaints and build a profile no defense lawyer could scrub clean. That night, Maya stood before the city's Civilian Oversight Board, holding a USB drive packed with everything: statements, footage, documentation. The room was silent. Just as she began, doesn't arrive with flags and fanfare. It arrives when someone refuses to look away. She scanned the faces of the board, filling in the public park. She remembered what dignity felt like, and she remembered who first gave it to her. Because she refused to stay silent, today we have the chance not only to expose one man's abuse of power, but the culture that enabled him. No one clapped, but no one looked away. At Palm Hollow, justice didn't explode in protests. It didn't need bullhorns, but it burned quietly, like current beneath the earth. The next morning, the whole town buzzed with whispers. At the corner barber shop, old men folded their newspapers more slowly. At the breakfast diner, waitresses lingered at tables, ears tilted toward hushed voices. Something had changed. Not loudly, not violently, but truly, deeply, irrevocably. The story ends here, but in reality it has only just begun, because beyond that door there are still hundreds of thousands of untold stories. And somewhere inside each of us, there's an Autumn Wade waiting to be awakened. At Clara's laundromat, where secrets were often bleached clean with detergent and soothed with dryer sheets, something rare was happening. Women were beginning to speak. Maya Williams stood in the doorway, not in uniform, just jeans, a neat jacket, and eyes as sharp as the day she wore a badge. She wasn't there to investigate, she was there to listen, and when Sharon McBride walked in, a chair was already waiting. The coffee pot was warm on the table. The aroma filled the small room, bathed in soft yellow light. Sharon was now 32, short hair, eyes tired but alert. She sat stiffly, hands clutching a frayed old purse like it was her last piece of armor. "This isn't going to be in the papers, is it?" Sharon asked, eyes avoiding Maya's. "I don't do press," Maya replied gently. "I do truth. Even when it hurts." Sharon's jaw tensed. Anybody made me feel like I was paranoid, like I exaggerated, that there were no cameras, that I should take it as a compliment. Maya nodded, never interrupting. "It was 5 years ago," Sharon continued, her voice cracking at the edge of memory. "I got pulled over for a busted tail light. He said I looked nervous, told me to step out, said he needed to search me. Then he touched me where no one had the right to." I froze, like I always do when I'm scared. She quickly wiped her eyes. "I filed a complaint. You know what Internal Affairs told me? Your story doesn't match the officer's standard conduct." Maya sat still, her hands folded calmly on the table, like she was dusting off a long-buried truth. "They said that because they didn't want the truth to exist." Sharon looked up. Her skeptical eyes brushed against hope, knowing, "Is someone listening now?" "Because Autumn Wade refused to stay silent," Maya said. "And because someone else, me, still remembers that you were never meant to be erased from the story." Sharon leaned back and let out a long breath. "You want me to testify?" "No," Maya said, gaze steady. "I want you to be heard." Silence. Then a nod, small but firm. "Okay." That afternoon, Maya returned to the records room behind District 9. Where dust floated like fragments of forgotten memory. She flipped through files. Paper whispered. Complaints redacted. Phrases repeated like mold growing in walls. Insufficient evidence. Inconsistent details. Officer followed protocol, but the name kept appearing. Luke Brenner. She wasn't building a case. She was revealing a pattern. And patterns are harder to deny than isolated incidents. That evening, Maya met Autumn at a small tea shop, run by a Vietnamese couple who called everyone sweetheart, and remembered orders after just one visit. The space was quiet, scented with jasmine, and full of pauses where the soul could begin to heal. Autumn sat cross-legged, hands wrapped around a warm teacup. The light reflected in her eyes, still tired, but clearer, like someone relearning how to breathe without bracing for pain. "There was a girl," Autumn said softly. "She messaged me after the story went viral, said she was scared, didn't dare go to the station, but she remembered Brenner patrolling near her middle school bus stop. Said he'd ask her if she had a boyfriend yet." Maya's jaw clenched. "Is she ready to come forward?" Autumn shook her head. "Not yet, but we don't pressure them," Maya replied. "But we don't let them be forgotten either." Autumn looked up. For the first time, her eyes didn't just hold memory. They held purpose. "Why do they always think silence is safe?" Maya smiled softly. A smile touched by both pain and hope. "Because they've never heard the sound of silence when it shatters." That night, Maya stood before the large corkboard in her small apartment. A red web spread like blood vessels across the wooden surface. Photos, reports, screenshots of messages from women too scared to sign their names. At the center, one word, Patton. Red string connected the dots. Sharon, Autumn, the girl at the bus stop, Slater's confession, the veteran's statement. One truth tied it all together. Brenner didn't make a mistake. He hunted, and the system had left the door wide open for him. Maya pinned a new clue to the board, then stepped back, her eyes burning. Palm Hollow thought it was whispering, but it had just begun to roar. Palm Hollow City Hall had never been a place for truth. Marble floors, polished brass railings, everything designed to muffle voices, not amplify them. But that morning, as the council chamber slowly filled, truth arrived, on quiet feet, with steady voices, through the trembling hands of women who had waited too long to be believed. Autumn Wade sat near the front row, her back straight, though her fingertips still trembled. She hadn't come to nurse wounds. She had come to break a wall, so that no one else would ever have to sit alone on a park bench, wondering if anyone would believe what had just happened to them. Beside her, Sharon McBride held her story like a live coal, knowing that this time it might burn through indifference to ignite something bigger than grief. At the back of the room, Sergeant Maya Williams leaned against the wall. Not today's speaker, but its guardian. She didn't need to stand at the podium. Her work was already woven into the room. In every document, every witness, every clip, already prepared. The council chair, an African-American woman in her late 60s named Elaine Brower, adjusted her glasses, then tapped her gavel lightly on the table. Her voice was low, firm, part grandmother, part someone long past tired of excuses. We are here to review allegations of misconduct within District 9. This is not a trial, but it is a reckoning. I was the first to rise. Her voice was steady. Hell doesn't yell, Autumn said, clear, not combative. And that's what made it worse. He smiled, softly, as if what he did to me was normal. She paused, then continued, this time without hesitation. I stayed silent because I thought no one would care. But then Maya showed up, and I remembered something. The justice sometimes doesn't make a sound. It just shows up and stays. The room was completely silent. Then Sharon stood. She walked forward. She didn't need to look at anyone to know this was her moment. Helmy pulled me over 5 years ago, said I looked nervous, asked if I was hiding anything under my shirt, then told me to step out. Searched me like I wasn't even human. I filed a complaint. They said I was exaggerating. Her voice trembled. But she kept going. But I wasn't exaggerating. Behind her, a woman in a red blouse stood, then another, and another. I remember him. I was in high school, always stood too close. Asked for my number. I was only 13. I never said anything because I didn't think it would change anything. Maya stood, not to speak, just to walk to the council's table and place down a file. Inside, over a dozen sworn statements, time-stamped complaint records, a copy of Officer Slater's full confession. Elaine Brower turned each page slowly, quietly, then looked up, her gaze sharp as a whetted blade. For years, this place called patterns, coincidences, that ends today. A ripple of murmurs passed through the room, quiet, but heavy as a turning point. Outside, reporters pressed against the glass. Palm Hollow wasn't just watching, it was listening. After the hearing, Maya and Autumn descended the courthouse steps together. They said nothing until their feet reached the sidewalk. You were very brave in there, Maya said softly. Autumn shook her head, eyes on the misty morning city. Not brave, just overdue. Maya paused, then asked, how do you feel? Autumn took a deep breath. Her eyes scanned beyond the horizon, where a sliver of light was beginning to rise after so many dark days. Like I finally stood up using my own name. Maya nodded slowly. That's the first crack, she said. Walls don't fall in one night. But once they crack, they don't stop. Autumn nodded. The two women stood there a moment longer, not related, not of the same time, but connected by one shared truth, and a promise that didn't need to be spoken. This silence would never return. The air was cold, not because of the weather, but because something was coming. Palm Hollow's central courthouse, once a monument to old promises, was now about to become the starting point of something new. Carved into the stone above its arched entryway was a single word: justice. But most who had walked through those doors had long stopped believing it. Only today, the air was different. Not hope, responsibility, not soft but sharp and hungry, like wind that had been blocked for years. Inside courtroom 3B, every seat was filled. Reporters lined the back wall. The screens switched into silent mode. Survivors sat side by side. Some had spoken, some never dared to, but all were present. At the defendant's table, Officer Luke Brenner no longer wore his uniform, but a tailor's suit, though the arrogance remained. Tie straight, ice cold as steel. His lawyer overly confident. To Brenner, this was just a storm to wait out, a round of internal scrutiny before things returned to normal. But at the witness stand, Autumn Wade sat upright, hands clasped. "I was reading a book," she said, voice even. Asked for my ID, but before I could answer, he used his baton to flip my skirt. She paused for a second. No screaming, no tears. Just the truth. Not laughed, like it was funny, like I didn't matter. The entire courtroom held its breath. The defense attorney leaned forward and asked, "Miss Wade, did he physically touch you?" "No," Autumn replied, voice firm. "Then have to. What he did was domination, humiliation. You don't have to touch skin to leave a bruise." A wave of tension swept the room. No gavel was needed. The truth had already been spoken. Next came Sharon McBride, dressed in a light gray sweater, calm and composed. She didn't cry, she didn't shake. Filed a complaint 5 years ago. They dismissed it, but the truth has never changed. The defense attorney objected. "Irrelevant testimony." The judge simply nodded. "Pattern evidence is admissible." Then came Slater. Clear, concise. His demeanor was anxious but direct. "I laughed when it happened," he admitted, "because I didn't know what else to do. I was afraid of him. But that doesn't excuse anything. I didn't protect her. I betrayed my badge." Prosecutor Reva Langston, a composed black woman in her mid-50s, closed arguments with a quiet severity. "This case is not about a single act. It is about a man who used his badge as a weapon to prey on the vulnerable. A man who believed that women without power had no voice." Then she looked straight at the jury. "But today we prove he was wrong, and you have the opportunity to turn truth into justice." Riener never took the stand. His lawyer had advised silence because even he knew the mask had already cracked. While the jury deliberated, Maya Williams and Autumn Wade sat in the waiting room outside. No uniforms, no reporters, just two women, and the faint hum of a vending machine in the far corner. Have you ever waited for justice in silence? No certainty, no applause, just the hope that if you speak, someone will listen. "You did everything right," Maya said softly. Autumn stared straight ahead, as if trying to hear something she'd never dared believe in. "I don't feel brave." "Bravery," Maya replied, "isn't a feeling. It's what you do when you're afraid." Autumn let out a long, slow breath. What if they let him go? Maya didn't sugarcoat it. They might, but even if they do, the silence around him is gone. Can't hide in the dark anymore. The door opened. Everyone stood. 12 jurors. Sheet of paper passed from the clerk to the judge. She read aloud. "On the charge of abuse of power under color of law, guilty. On the charge of harassment with intent to humiliate, guilty. On the charge of official misconduct, guilty." Autumn didn't cry. She didn't cheer. Her hands simply relaxed. Like after years, she could finally let go of a breath held too long. Brenner didn't look at her. He didn't have the courage. But Maya did. She watched him as the cuff snapped around his wrists. Her gaze free of hatred, free of pity, just the truth. Then she turned to Autumn. "You stood up," Maya said gently, "and the whole world moved." Outside the courthouse, the sunlight had turned golden. Not triumph, not glory, as light, and that was enough. The sound of the cuffs wasn't loud, but it echoed in the silence of a man who knew his role had ended. And that silence said more than any defense ever could. Officer Luke Brenner, once the untouchable face of District 9, now walked out of the courtroom in handcuffs, eyes vacant. Reporters swarmed like gulls sensing something rotting, but he said nothing. Pride had crumbled long before the verdict was read. Inside, the courtroom hung in something too heavy to call relief. Not joy, not victory, this release. Autumn Wade sat back down, inhaling deeply, like she was learning to breathe a new kind of air. In her hand, she gently held the folded note from the girl in the red dress, the one who had watched her rise during the hearing 2 days ago. The message, scribbled in blue marker, read, "You're the reason I believe girls can be brave." Maya stood near the exit, arms crossed, expression unreadable. She'd seen many verdicts. She'd seen guilty men walk free. But this one was different, not because it was rare, but because, for the truth to be seen, ordinary people had done extraordinary things. Next to her, Detective Rowena Fields removed her glasses and whispered, 18 months. Think that's enough? Maya didn't flinch. It's not about the time, it's the stain. His badge will never shine again. From a side door, Jim Slater exited with the Internal Affairs team. He'd taken the deal. Suspended sentence, demotion, permanent ban from patrol duty, and a mandate to testify in every future misconduct case. Some called it a deal. Others said justice had its teeth filed down. Slater paused as he walked past Maya. "Asking forgiveness," he said. "I just hope my testimony helped a little." Maya looked at him. Not cold, not forgiving, as honest. "You didn't protect her," Maya replied, "but you stopped lying. That's the first step." He nodded and walked away without looking back. That evening, Maya and Autumn returned to the park, not for victory, not for ceremony or symbolism, just because they believed the place where it all began deserved to be seen in a new light. They walked slowly past the wooden bench where everything happened. Autumn reached out, lightly touching the worn armrest, the grain of the wood rough and warm beneath her fingers. A small scratch remained on the seat, where her book had fallen that day. Now it looked like memory, faded, but never gone. "Did you ever think it would end like this?" Autumn asked. "No," Maya answered truthfully, "but I also never thought you'd be the one to finish it." Autumn let out a soft laugh, dry and light, like wind slipping through a newly opened door. "Neither did I." Then she sat down, this time without hesitation, without fear, but with confidence. She looked at Maya, her expression calm. "Can I tell you something that might sound strange?" Maya nodded. "I don't feel angry anymore," Autumn said. "I thought I would. But now, I just feel clean, like I finally stepped out of something I didn't even know was tightening around me." Maya watched her for a long moment, then sat beside her. "That's the nature of injustice," she said. "It becomes the air we breathe. We inhale it daily, without knowing, until someone opens a window." Autumn tilted her head, looking at Maya. "You opened it." Maya shook her head gently. "No, you kicked it open." The wind rolled across the lake, cool and clear. "After a while," Autumn said, "I've been thinking maybe I'll create a space for girls like me, for women like Sharon, or for anyone not ready yet, a place to breathe, to speak, without judgment." Maya smiled, not broadly but sincerely. "Or what would you call it?" Autumn looked ahead, thoughtful. "Maybe the stand. 'Cause that's all I did." I stood up. Maya nodded slowly, and the earth seemed to shift with her. Far off, the streetlights began to glow, one by one, forming a golden path home. Behind them, the bench remained quiet, ordinary, unchanged. But they weren't unchanged, and nothing about that change was small. 3 weeks after the trial, the leaves in Palm Hollow began to turn. The tall maple at the center of the park, once bare and indifferent, now burned with soft amber, as if shedding something heavy. Autumn Wade sat beneath its branches. Same bench, but this time she wasn't alone. Children's laughter echoed in the distance. Joggers passed by. Life was happening, and for the first time in years, Autumn wasn't behind glass. She was in it. On her lap sat a folder, its cover creased, filled with pages of dense notes. On the front, in handwritten black marker, "The Silent Stand." A soft voice pulled her from her thoughts. "You really called it that?" Maya Williams appeared, holding 2 paper cups of coffee. Autumn looked up and smiled. "It was never really silent. I just didn't know how loud it was until someone finally listened." Maya sat beside her, handing her a cup. Her movements were slower now, more grounded, like someone who had chosen a new chapter. She had just formally transferred out of Internal Affairs, to become a community liaison officer, supporting survivors of abuse. The title didn't matter. The mission had already begun. "You've got sign-ups already," Maya said, nodding toward the folder. 36, Autumn replied. "Mostly high school girls. A few older women, too. They said they'd been waiting years to speak up," she added softly. "They just needed someone to go first." Maya leaned back on the bench, gaze steady and warm. "Oh, that someone was you." Autumn looked out toward the lake. The breeze rippled the surface, reflecting the soft afternoon light. "I was so afraid." "That's how you know it mattered," Maya said. Between them, silence fell. Not empty, but full. The kind of silence you only share with someone who truly understands. Then a little girl, maybe 8 or 9, approached slowly, clutching a plain white envelope. "Are you Autumn?" the girl asked. Voice light as air. "Yes," Autumn answered, crouching to meet her eyes. "My sister said you're the reason she told our mom what the coach did." Autumn froze. "Is she okay?" "Uh-huh." Her voice trembled slightly. "She's okay now," the girl said. "She wanted me to give you this." Autumn opened the envelope. Inside was a folded piece of notebook paper, handwritten in bubble letters with colored markers. "You changed something, thank you." Autumn pressed the note to her chest. She didn't cry, she just took a deep breath, this time without fear. Maya unfastened her coat and pulled out a small bronze pin. Simple, shaped like an open eye. "This belonged to a woman I worked with in D.C. before I came back south," Maya said. "Jerry used to tell me, justice isn't revenge, it's remembrance." Maya pinned it gently to Autumn's lapel. "You remember now, and you're helping others do the same." Autumn stood, looked back at the bench one last time, not with fear, not with anger, but with gratitude. That this place, this memory had been rewritten. "I used to think power was something you had to be born into," Autumn said, "but maybe it's just knowing your story matters." Maya stood, smiling, and telling it, whether anyone listens or not. They walked away from the bench together. 2 women, 2 generations, not related, but bound by something stronger than blood, truth, claimed and shared. As they disappeared down the tree-lined path, a single maple leaf drifted down from the branches, spiraling in the wind before settling gently on the bench. A reminder of where everything once broke and where it was made whole again.